I think like for a while we've had some video essayists versus debate bro discourse, and I don't know why it keeps popping up, but like it's been an ongoing issue between these two groups. It seems like it's been like video essayists basically critiquing debate bros more so than the other way around, and some of the criticisms can be seen as valid, some of them not so much. But what has your thoughts been on these arguments and whenever they pop up?
Yeah, I think 99% of it is because people find one group finds the other distasteful, usually one direction from the essayists to the debaters, but they don't like to admit that that's the only problem they have, so they try to intellectualize it. And I don't know, I feel like every criticism you get from video essayists to debate bros that actually gets picked up on is just like it's either that they don't understand the spaces very well, like it sounds like they just kind of looked at it from the outside for 5 minutes and then just decided to do an essay about it, or there's like a lack of like diversity of tactics, or there's the fact that a lot of debate bros are quite abrasive and quite combative, and I guess video essayists are just a bit more like socially anxious people and they don't understand that. But yeah, I don't know, I think 99% of it is just all like bullshit. A lot of the conflict, there's good criticisms of both, right? There's good criticisms of debaters in the way that like optics plays such a massive part of it. I feel like a lot of debate streamers just feel like they're playing characters rather than actually trying to be sincere about having conversations. The most efficient thing to do as a video essayist is to glance a few articles about an issue, preferably one that suits the ideology of you and your audience, put it out, and then that's all you know about that topic. And then you just jump onto the next one. So you get like very hollow analysis and probably very like ideologically biased, maybe some misinformation, but I don't know. I think it becomes so tribal, you know?
Yeah, it does seem like it becomes two sides of the same coin, like just duking it out over just about nothing. What kind of criticisms do you think are valid from either side, I guess?
Um, yeah, just like, I guess like they're aside the ones I mentioned. To me, a debate bro, or like for being gender neutral, like a debate pervert, because there are like not they're not all male.
Yeah.
Like they uh they're yeah, like optics are really important, like really really and I think a lot of debaters kind of put optics first. So there's this stereotype of a debate bro who just comes in very little information, just is half the time just relying on chat to send them links or talking points in the middle of an argument, but they're good enough at public speaking and they're good enough at like dunking and they're good enough at like controlling a conversation that they just kind of get through it, that's a problem I see with debates a lot, and it makes things very unproductive when someone is just there to puff their chest and to posture and to like dominate, right? Because
Hmm.
I imagine most people who got inspired by debating probably saw like people like Matt Dillahunty, or I guess like all those old atheists like Christopher Hitchens like dominating in debates, and then they thought I can do that too, but they don't really copy the stuff that goes on behind the scenes so much, like all the research and all the thought that goes into all these arguments and all the experience. They just copy the optical part, right? Like the dunking thing. So it becomes really shallow. I think that's a really good criticism of debate bros and debate culture, is that it's very optically based to the point that I actually think, well, I know, how like streamers speak a lot more behind the scenes than maybe viewers realize. Um,
Yeah.
like I feel like with debate people, like we all have enough like mutual friends that we know what each other's like behind the scenes. There are some debaters out there who are just like that's not what they're like as people. They're just playing a character. They're just performing, and I find that really like, especially when it's over quite serious issues. Sometimes I just find that kind of like gross. But yeah. So that's debate thing. I guess we can do video essays as well if you want. Sorry, I'm
Sure.
rambling.
Yeah. No, you're
Yeah,
fine.
but so when I used to make video essays, the most efficient way for me to make a video essay was just to grab a few articles on an issue and a few very ideologically slanted ones, because I know my audience and I know what I believe in and I know what my leanings are, and then just present that. If I'm off, I don't feel like I need to know that much about an issue sometimes to write a video essay that's quite convincing. I don't do that anymore. I try to like read a lot more than I've actually put into the video itself, but there have definitely been essays I've done where the only thing I have to say about that topic is just what was in the video, which is quite shallow, I think. The other thing as well is just like you're still motivated by all the same clickbaiting stuff. So even if I have a topic I'm really interested in, like refugee rights, no one's going to watch me just talking about refugee rights. They will talk about it. They will watch it if the medium is me shitting on Lauren Southern for her treatment of refugees, right? Same with Ukraine. People pay more attention to Ukraine videos if I talk about Russell Brand or Hassan.
Mhm.
So that's kind of, and I think maybe some of the quality of the information gets lost, or it's a lot more challenging. So yeah, and also video essayists just live in like they live in a very safe space when it comes to politics. Most political advocacy people get into involves some kind of conflict with the other side, right? Like whether it's if you're wanting to be in politics or a journalist or an interviewer, you're probably going to have to go on TV at some point and debate someone who's on the opposite side. You're going to have to be challenged. If you're going to do talks at university, you're going to have to do like Q&A sections where people might challenge you. If you want to be like a political activist in the streets or handing out leaflets, members of the public will try to argue with you, and you have to be prepared for all that. If you're a video essayist, you don't need to do any of that. You can just preach to the choir and then just disappear behind the curtain whenever it gets too uncomfortable. You know, you don't even need to read any of the comments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that has seemed like kind of a dissonance that I've seen with even, I think, like streamers can get into that too. But it has seemed like it's been a bit of an issue with video essayists because they are a little bit, they do have that kind of arm's length with the people that they're engaging with through their videos. So it's a little more less direct than what streamers and debate people usually go through. But like you said, how you approach a video essay, how did you approach your debates?
Usually, just it depends on whatever the topic. Yeah, usually I'll just do like an obscene amount of research for whatever topic and try to see what the other person believes as well. So I might watch some of their previous content because a lot of people just recycle the same talking points. Yeah, I just try to know as much as possible before going in. And something I'm maybe not as good at is like narrativizing and trying to control and like lead a conversation in the right direction, or to I'm maybe not as good at thinking on my feet as I'd like to be. But yeah, just yeah, with debating, I feel like I just need to know a lot more. I feel like I need to know every argument and every twist and turn. But otherwise, it's just, I guess, depending on how good or bad faith they are. I think these days I'm kind of trying to avoid the more bad faith characters because it's not really my content and it causes a lot more stress than I get, and compared to me getting like nothing in return for it, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I guess like yeah, just trying to know as much as I can is
Yeah.
like the main thing for debates. Yeah.
It has
Google
seemed
Docs are very
like
important to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it has seemed like over time more and more people in the debate scene have been like doing a lot more research when it comes to these topics. The first time I saw like a huge effort in particular with Vosh was when he did that first debate with Sargon of Akkad and then went back and did it again but with a lot more, like taking in some of the criticisms that people had about that debate, but that was like a long time ago. So, but I think people would be more should be more inclined to like bring more research and all that to these kinds of debates. And I honestly, video essayists could do that too, to a certain extent, because there's some video essayists who don't do a ton of research. But yeah, I think that's like a big problem with like misinformation in general that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, I think the Vosh one's especially interesting because I always felt like the level of research Vosh had done for both Sargon debates was like kind of the same.
Mhm.
His talking points weren't that different. It's just that in the first one, he was really fucking angry.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just yeah, unfortunately that's the world we live in though. That is like Sargon is a fucking moron, but he's very good at just being a smug moron. And like his
Yeah.
entire strategy is to not concede anything, be very bad faith, and just try to like annoy the other person into like looking worse than you do. It's really yeah, I can imagine it must have taken a lot of effort to learn that lesson.
Yeah, I think particularly people who do debates try to in real time like take those criticisms in and try to do better for next time.
Mhm.
I think it's more of a slower kind of thing for video essayists if they do take in criticisms. Just I guess based on the fact that it's like a longer form type of thing. Like debates are usually just one and done, but like videos, you have a huge process of just making it and writing it and all that, and then posting it to YouTube, and like over time getting a bunch of criticism and all that just to like to wash over you, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah. It's hard when it comes to debates because obviously like there's a lot more room for you making mistakes. I feel like also if you're not laying out your argument like step by step by step like you would in a video essay, it's very easy for people to interpret you badly. I think the thing with debating as well is that for some people it's like their main thing. So I understand why there's a lot of ego surrounding it and there's a lot of like unwillingness to reassess if you've made a mistake or something like that. But like generally for me, I think like because I just don't take the debating side that seriously, I do make like if I've made a mistake in a debate, I feel like it's quite okay, like, it's whatever. I'll just not make it again. And if I feel like I've shifted my position from one debate onto another one, then it's like I'm not that fussed about that. It's just like part of the process, you know.
Yeah. Before we move on to deplatforming, I do want to talk about one issue that video essayists have said about people who debate. Like,
Okay.
one of the issues that I've seen brought up from them has been that it's not diverse enough. Like you said in the beginning, like it's more than just debate bros. They're saying it like it's an all white boys club. But we have debaters such as Demon Mama, Shark 300, and Merrick,
Hmm.
and it seems like they intentionally leave that out, like all the diversity that we have on the left debate sphere. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. When video essayists say debate bros, they just mean they mean Vosh, right?
Yeah,
Or
basically.
Destiny, and they also mean Xanderhall for some really fucking weird reason because Xanderhall doesn't do debates, right? Like
I think he's
Keffels does
done
more
like two
debates than.
debates, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's done like very few, right? It's not
Yeah.
his content though. Yeah, like Keffels does more debates than Xanderhall. Yeah, Demon Mama obviously does a lot more debates than Xanderhall. Shark, I do more debates than yeah, but like we just never get lumped into the Denims. I think has done about as many debates as Xanderhall in the last 2 years. So people could maybe just be more direct if they want to address a particular creator. But yeah, like there is diversity in the debate bro sphere. Like you're completely right, and yeah, even debate bro is like maybe debate pervert's just like a better term now. I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, Hunter Avalon, he never gets even though he debates like all the time. Yeah, I think it's just the problem is that debate bro thing is like most debate streamers just don't get that big though, right?
Yeah.
Most of them stay below 100K subs, and that's just how it is. But yeah, I don't know. I wish people, yeah, like if people are more specific with it, it's definitely a lot more helpful. But it used to be the case. I feel like a lot of people don't remember this. Is that it used to be very like debaters and video essayists were just like they just got on. That was just very normal. Like, I don't know if you know this, but like you know, back in the day when like ContraPoints occasionally did debates.
Yeah.
Yeah, she debated like Blair White, and she she even went on debate panels with Destiny. Like they both went on like a 2v4 like alt right thing with like Fuentes was there, Lauren Southern was there, and like those two actually used to talk on Destiny stream together quite a lot. Like they would either argue about things or they would just have like regular conversations.
Hmm.
And that was like, I guess she was like the big essayist and he was the big debater of the time. But that whole thing is kind of gone now, right? Like it's really weird that a lot of the big video essayists just don't talk to anyone, or they don't talk to anyone who's got a big enough disagreement with them. And even within the debate sphere, a lot of them don't talk to each other anymore either. Like Vosh never talks to Destiny, and they never talk to Hassan. And I feel like there's maybe something missing there. I can totally see why though, because obviously each channel has their own too much to lose, not much to gain thing from it, but or at least they feel that way. Yeah, I think actually even ContraPoint still has her own debate with Sargon still up as well, a really old one. So yeah, I think I can totally understand there are certain people that people don't want to talk to and all that, but like, yeah, I think that bit is that's definitely missing because it would probably solve a lot of the problems as well.
Yeah. I totally get that, yeah. I feel like there's so much drama in these spaces, and considering it's online, you kind of expect it, but also like it goes a little too far sometimes. Like it doesn't matter what side it is. Like some people just tend to go a little too far with certain things depending on how they're feeling at the moment. So I just think it's an issue that we have in general with like our very online society. So
Yeah, I think the thing that's really off-putting is that, like, in the debate sphere, there's this video essayists do this as well, though, when they engage in debates, if they ever. It's like this thing where people will do a debate, and then as soon as the debate's over, one side or even both sides are just like set on the like immediate follow-up task of just character assassinating like the fuck out of whoever they just spoke to, whether it's like gathering clips or just like lying about them or whatever else. I think that's like, and audiences are going after them and all that. Like, yeah, that's when things get kind of rough. I wish people just didn't take I think people just take themselves way too seriously in the space. But I guess maybe if you're a debater and that's like your main thing, you probably have a lot more riding on it. But
Hmm.
yeah, it does. Like, it gets so toxic. Yeah, like every time there's like especially like a left on left debate, right? Like the amount of times it ends, and then the next day, like one side is calling the other like a fucking Nazi or a Holocaust denier or whatever the fuck else. It's just like, just chill, Jesus.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. I saw your initial take on the stream VOD on deplatforming,
Mhm.
and if I remember correctly, you were staunchly against deplatforming in most circumstances. Is that correct?
Ugh, I feel it feels kind of weird worded in that way, but like yeah, no,
it
I think I do think fuck it's really hard to decide because I think this is one of those issues where I just don't think there's a good answer, right? So I go back and forth a lot. But yeah, I think if you're going to deplatform someone, you need a very good reason for it. I think like because for me, as for like, if you're in a cafe or like in your job and all that, you can deplatform like a lot. You can deplatform a lot of opinions. I think there should be in society like at least a couple of areas where that are just like safe spaces for speech, where any batshit person can just say whatever nonsense they want to. I
yeah.
think one of those places should definitely be universities. I think that should be a place where people are okay to discuss anything. Um, in certain venues, like because it's very easy to just like not turn up if you don't want to or whatever. Um, like I think that's one of them, and I think the other one, there has to be some kind of space when it comes to like online stuff. And I think I don't know, I feel like YouTube's like quite a good candidate for it. Like there should be somewhere where people can just. I don't think it should be like people going on the BBC or Fox News or whatever like to talk about like the weekly Holocaust denial debate and all that. But there should be somewhere where people can do that, and I think like online is a good place for that. So yeah, I'm a lot more skeptical of deplatforming nowadays as like a kind of like a bandage solution to like right wing issues.
Did you already believe that much when you made the video, or did you like go through your thoughts and learn more and do introspection in that time?
Yeah, quite a lot of it. I also, yeah, introspection, and I also just like read the studies like over and over again because the first time, like a lot of those studies that I used for my deplatforming video, I actually discovered them from a YouTuber called FD Signifier.
Hmm.
I found that through him making a very pro deplatforming video saying that there needs to be more of it and it needs to happen quicker and like more aggressively. Um, but then I read the studies quickly, like I glanced over the studies he was citing, and I found that quite a lot of them didn't actually say that. A lot of them were saying that social media companies need to consider that once you remove someone from your platform, you're making your platform a better place, true enough, but you're also contributing to the growth of an alternative platform. And the problem with that is if you keep deplatforming people off of the big spaces too quickly, then you're contributing to the growth of smaller spaces. And we know that smaller spaces, they'll go there with smaller audiences, but they go there with smaller audiences that are a lot more radical and a lot more toxic and a lot more like mask off and a lot less inhibited. And the creators become less inhibited as well. And there's this like vicious cycle of radicalization. And I don't buy the argument anymore that the numbers are all that matters because we know that the big threat of like offline violence comes from alternative platforms. It's
Hmm.
people who post on Gab or 8chan. And when you're growing those alternative spaces, you're growing the number of like potential people who can do stuff like that, or people who can organize to do like a January 6th, right? So I don't, and it's also just the fact that we haven't been deplatforming people for very long. So we started really deplatforming people for like right wing views on YouTube in like 2018. People might joke about how Gab and Rumble and Cozy and all that are really small now, but they're growing and they're going to keep growing. I think we need to get better at addressing the issues rather than just trying to push it all under the carpet.
I think my biggest issue is the most harmful actors who, whether or not they have a large audience, basically they're doing a lot of harm through being on the more public platforms. I don't know, like my feelings are that it scares me sometimes that like they're just allowed to say really close to being like extremely violent rhetoric that in turn sparks other people to do the same, like, but in a physical form, I guess. But yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, were you finishing?
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's like the most convincing argument for deplatforming to me, right? Like it's very easy for me as like a cishet dude to be like, yeah, just talk about whatever you fuck you want, I'll debate anything. I'll do Holocaust denial. We'll do like I don't know, genocide denial. We'll do all the like whatever. So we'll do race realism. But like yeah, the problem is that like that doesn't hurt me that much, right? Whereas if you're a minority, if you're trans or if you're black or if you're gay or whatever, yeah, that those discussions are very harmful to you, and those communities are very harmful to you as well. Like they're like it's not like at the end of the day, I'm not the one that people are going to harass to the ends of the earth online, right? It's like it's trans people and it's like other minorities. So, but when I consider that with like the harmful actors, the way I think about it is like I think there's like a behavior there that's bannable more so than any particular idea, right? Because someone can actually have like bigoted but not like the craziest bigoted ideas. Like you can actually be someone who's online just like, oh, like trans people, I respect their rights and all that, they seem cool, but I'm just a bit worried about like prisons and shelters and bathrooms. I just think we don't want to like achieve trans rights on the backs of women's rights and all that. Like, and I'm like, you can believe that and you can say it in that way, but you can somehow be so obsessed with that one issue that you end up like cultivating an audience of the most hateful people on earth, right? And I think Tommy Robinson's a good example of that as well, that I was speaking about, because his rhetoric when it comes to Muslims is not like as bad as, like, he's not like a race realist about it. He's not like a Holocaust denier or any of those things, or he doesn't say it anyway. But his behavior and the way he expresses those ideas are just like, it's just destruction. Like there's no conversation to be had there. So the way I think about it is like, if you think of your town square, and it's like the way I consider hateful groups who are worthy of deplatforming is someone who says, I'm going to go into the town square and I'm going to use my free speech rights to scream into a megaphone right next to the ears of like a minority that I don't like. Because I think a lot of harmful actors are like, the thing that about them that makes them bannable is that their free speech is like incompatible with someone else's, and that's where they're like, I think there should be really good standards for bullying, targeted harassment, doxing, even like, or at least some degree of doxing, because yeah, like you at the end of the day, you have to keep minorities like relatively safe. um,
I was just thinking about like a moment that I had seen. I don't remember if it was your video essay, but like I think a really good way to describe it is like in spaces where there's free speech and there's like limitless amounts of ways you can engage in it. You do need to have some sort of control on that free speech, because the people who use their free speech to prevent others from having their own free speech
mhm.
will just devolve into chaos. You're closer to where that place was. I don't remember what it's called, but like it's in, I believe, the UK, where it was like a park where they used to do death row, and they got to say whatever they wanted in their last statement of free speech, speaker's corner,
Yeah.
like the person in your chat says. And basically they stopped doing that with the people on death row and just let everyone say everything. And then like I was saying earlier, people came in and started to prevent other people from having their own free speech. We have real life justifications of that kind of stuff happening. I don't know exactly where that line would be, because there's so much like dog whistling with speech nowadays. But I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really hard line to draw. I always prefer the idea of, I think roughly the thing I said was that it's people who force you to make a choice, right? It's our speech or it's someone else's. That's the kind of thing I'm most interested in. When it comes to like harmful ideas, I think I'm much more lean towards like algorithmic suppression. I think apparently it works. Apparently YouTube can like algorithmic changes can reduce like the amount of conspiratorial stuff down by like 40-50%.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I stand. I don't really want to live in a world where like I don't like in Germany and France and all that where if you do like Holocaust denial they jail you, you know? I don't see that being particularly helpful. I think it's better to kind of like educate society in how to deal with things like that or allow them to speak but in ways that like can still stop them from ever using those ideas to do anything more than just talk about them. It seems a bit utopian because obviously like the ideas themselves are quite violent, but I think at the end like I don't think we can carry on with this whole thing of like this person deserves to get banned because they're harmful. Because if you're going like people who just come on YouTube and just blurt shit out about politics, I think most of them are kind of harmful. I think we've all said stuff online that's probably got some like misinformation or some level of harm. And actually, I think a lot of even leftist communities are very harmful in their rhetoric and the way that and the things that they talk about and the information they spread, especially when you go into that's not even to mention like going into tanky territory, you know. So I think if we got to a point where we were like judging platforming or deplatforming based on like social harm, we'd all be gone. Yeah, there'd be like three people left who just fact check everything and read like NPR articles, and that would be it. You know.
Yeah. I want to ask something about the video that you made on deplatforming. What
Mhm.
was the most surprising thing that you learned from making that video?
I was surprised to, I guess, learn about how the paradox of tolerance, uh, because that's the thing that everyone uses
Mhm.
to deplatform people. I didn't realize that on the second sentence of that, or like it's really early on in the paragraph, like right at the top of the paragraph, he says he distinguishes between banning or suppressing intolerant philosophies versus like intolerant behavior. He very like not completely clearly, but it feels like fairly unambiguous, where he's talking about how suppressing intolerant philosophies would be like unwise as long as we can like counter them with arguments and things like that. And when he talks about intolerance, the things he's talking about are people who like are like advocates who keep their audiences away from arguments. They encourage their audiences to not to disengage from rationality, or they want people to like what was it answer arguments with their fists. So he's distinguishing very clearly there. He's not just saying like any person with intolerant idea has to go, right? um he's going a bit further than that, but again it's also just like it's very vague. The paradox of tolerance is like it's a footnote in a book about Plato. It's so yeah, I think it's one of those things that gets misused a bit, you know, like 14 points of fascism or something like that. Yeah.
Hmm. I think that's about all I have, unless we want to talk about trans genocide.
I oh god. Like listen, yeah, sure. Go for it.
Are you sure? We don't have
Yeah,
to.
it's no, it's good. It's fine. Like there are certain people I don't want to talk to about it because I think they're just like bad faith to the ends of the earth. But you're cool, so whatever.
Okay, well, thank you. I don't think I saw your response video, but I did see your original debate with poly people. Like over time, I guess I've been thinking about where you might be coming from. What exactly is your position on like there being a trans genocide or coming to a trans genocide?
So my position on whether there being one right now, I completely disagree with. The most common understanding of genocide is when a state or an army like organizes and premeditates like the killing of a certain group. I obviously I don't think that's happening in the United States right now. Whether we're talking about leading up to it, I think there are arguments where you can invoke the word in a non-hyperbolic way, although I feel like there's a lot of caveating. So I guess like where I would come from the people who want to invoke the word would be that like okay, what do Republicans or the more extreme Republicans or the pundits like the Matt Walshes, what do they believe about trans people? They believe that that transness isn't real. It's like a socially contagious mental disease that the world would just be a much better place without, right? I'm like, okay, you follow that to its logical conclusion, you're going to have like conversion therapy centers. You're going to have like suppression and dehumanization to the point that like it probably does become like morally acceptable in a society to kill them, right? So I think if you follow some of these thinkers to their logical conclusions, yeah, of course you can see like genocide starts with hatred, right? Like that's where it begins, or at least that's where the foundations for it are laid. But I think it's also worth considering that like the idea of a country that's been a liberal democracy for like a very like decades and decades and decades suddenly like flipping and getting across all these like institutional barriers and doing something like that, especially given that like most of the American public supports trans people. I just think we're a long ways away from it. I don't want to say it's impossible because nothing is, but yeah, I just think it's pretty unlikely.
Is the killing the only part of genocide that is important in that part of it to you?
I'm a little bit not 100% on this. I know that the original definition of genocide says that you can have genocide without killing. You can have like cultural genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Um, every example I've read about of cultural genocides, whether it's like the Japanese in Korea or the Russians in Ukraine or the like the Native American genocide or Canadian, like there's always like some degree of killing happening there anyway. Or even if they die of disease, it's because of the conditions they were put in, and it's because the people there were trying to reduce their numbers. So it's kind of like yeah, I don't know. The example I think of is like China, right? Like China, assuming there were no sterilizations, because that's what makes it a genocide, is like biological destruction. But assuming they stopped doing the forced sterilizations, well, they're still dragging you into camps, forcing you to like torturing you until you stop being like a Uyghur Muslim. They're deporting people, I think, and they're moving Han Chinese people into Uyghur people's houses forcibly to shift their culture. And they've, it's the highest surveillance zone in the world. There's lots of violence. There's lots of dehumanizing. So yeah, I feel like using the word like I call it like a cultural genocide or even like a proper genocide with the sterilization is kind of like you could invoke it there, I think, and you can invoke it in a lot of events in history, but I don't really know which particular event in the United States you could like use as an allegory for that. I think they're just like very different crimes.
There is like a bit of a push to do some of those things in a cultural genocide for trans people, especially in specific states. Like Tennessee, Florida, and Texas are big ones that I can think of. They're basically making laws, or I guess in some cases, not even making laws. Like they're just going right ahead and like telling basically the child protective services to take kids away from parents who are trans. To me, that is very close to like the Native American genocide, where they literally took Native American kids from their parents to re-educate them
Hmm.
into going into white society. So like that's kind of a mirror there to me. Also, there's been a few articles now where the conservatives are trying to take trans kids and in some instances trans adults and detransition them,
Hmm.
which is a huge problem because that drastically lowers their quality of life. So like, I think in those ways, it is in that way a cultural genocide. But I get that the killing isn't there yet. But like, I think in that way, it is another step towards the worst kinds of genocide that there are.
Yeah. So that, as far as I remember with the Texas thing, the thing that Abbott tried to do was to investigate families who allowed their kids to transition. And I think it was because there was one case where some parent said that his wife was like grooming his kid or like forcing his reluctant kid to take something like that. So I don't really so I don't think that they weren't able to with that directive. He wasn't able to make it an act of child abuse just to help your child transition. That would be like there's like very unconstitutional. But he was trying to make it that they investigate the parents. I think it was nine. Was it nine families were investigated initially, and then the directive was blocked at a federal level. So I don't know what they were hoping to find there. Whether he was thinking he could like find one parent that had like been reluctantly giving a kid hormones, or that had been like giving a kid like hormones without the kid actually wanting it, or something. I don't know, but like yeah, if it ever gets to a stage like, and I think there is a big gap between now and again then, but if it did get to a stage where a state had like a state run like conversion therapy center that they were able to, and they had found a way to just like seize people just because they were trans and bring them to these centers, then yeah, yeah, then go ahead, you call it genocide. Yeah, I would totally say that. Hopefully, there are way too many institutional barriers between any state and doing that and succeeding with it. But yeah, if like you said, if it's like you described, then yeah, that would change things for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I for me I see the intention of a lot of these politicians and people who are on the right, and like it's getting very close to that point where they're trying to like detransition adults who are just out there being happy in themselves. So
Mm.
like it's a very scary time for people out there, and like I'm hoping it doesn't get to that point, but I guess we'll just have to see.
Yeah, like it's I know the Lemkin Institute. I don't actually know how important these people are, but like I know they were trending. But yeah, they were saying that like turf rhetoric, I think they said was like genocidal. I don't think the article was particularly good, but yeah, I can see where that side of the argument comes from. I completely get that. Yeah, I guess the thing that was more frustrating to me was like calling people like accusing people of genocide denial for saying it's not, and like, or just like if you're not going to call it a genocide, it must mean that you don't recognize the threat, or you don't think that, or this idea that like, oh, like one of the worst arguments I heard was like invoking like the 10 stages thing and saying like, oh well, it's not happening yet, but we might as well call it one now because you can't call it a genocide when it's too late. I'm like, hey, you can prevent genocides, you know, you can do things now to stop it ever becoming a genocide. It's not like magically calling it a genocide now is going to, like, I don't know, inspire like a new level of action. Actually, yeah, it seems to be like the activists who are fighting these bills are doing a pretty good job of it as it is. And yeah,
I mean, it really depends on like what those how far those bills get. Because like if they get to the Supreme Court, then like we might be in trouble because we have a mostly conservative Supreme Court, and that's
yeah,
yeah.
we do, but we also have a conservative Supreme Court that seems to care at least a little bit more about the Constitution than about like the worst excesses of the Republicans. Like, for example, the Supreme Court didn't help Trump with the election at all. It's been federal judges who blocked the puberty blocker bans, right? Like in Arizona, and no, not Arizona. Arizona was able to ban surgeries for youths, but yeah, Alabama, Arkansas, who tried to do the bans on puberty blockers, where like the federal courts just said no, sorry, like can't do that. And I think I know they're trying to do this like 26 thing as well. Like if a federal judge is going to not let them block puberty blockers, then I don't know how they're going to let them get away with like 26 people under 26. Like again, like it could change, but I guess the biggest hopium I've had now is that Republicans have focused so hard on trans people because they don't have any other ideas. They're kind of bankrupt for that,
Yeah.
and it ruined them in the midterms. Like they're lost. Because the majority of Americans, and actually also a lot of Republican legislators, it turns out, just don't care for a lot of this. Like most of the states that those healthcare bans on kids were pushed through were red states, and most of them failed. Republicans voted against them, and you know, thanks to activists and Democrats as well. But yeah, I don't think there's a problem with minorities being like cautious, you know, like vigilant. But there is obviously there's a point where that discourse becomes like very toxic. Yeah,
What do you mean?
and like calling people genocide deniers or accusing people of genocide denial
Mm-hmm.
over that take. I think that's obscene. I don't think anything calls for that.
That's fair.
Or also like, you know, like if you don't believe it's a genocide, you're not an ally and all that shit. I'm like, come on, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit too far because like you're obviously an ally. I do think it is an issue of definition and like where you're looking to for that definition. But like not every definition of genocide is going to be the same because we've had so many people think about this. And yeah, it's a difficult subject to talk about, especially when you're talking about with the people who feel like they're about to be genocided. So so yeah.
Yeah, like it's difficult because like if I was being like obtuse, right? If I was being like a dumbass, like center ground liberal and all that, I'd be like, no, look at all the rights, like you got much more visibility. I'd be like, oh, look, you've got like more people, despite everything, it's probably the case that more kids will get puberty blockers this year than they did last year, and then more the next year, and then more the next year. And trans kids, we don't call them the T slur by default anymore. They did when I was a kid. So like it's, yeah, I could say that, but then again, it's like it's also with any like progress is you also get like the backlash. You get like the right wingers putting a microscope over you, right? And that must be pretty scary. Yeah, I'm like the fear is like I think it's quite justified. I used to feel this way about Middle Eastern people or like Muslims in the UK because it was just so socially acceptable for like 20 years after 9/11 to just like call Muslims terrorists, to beat the shit out of them or like to beat them to death sometimes because like they were always accused of grooming kids, like with the grooming gang stuff. Or it was acceptable for the state to detain you like completely arbitrarily just in case you might be a terrorist. It was okay to torture you sometimes. This happened to like teenagers on like very, very shaky suspected terrorism grounds. So that was a whole thing. And I used to think like throughout the whole 2010s, like, yeah, it does kind of feel like maybe we're in like 1920s Germany and instead of Jews, it's Muslims. Thankfully that didn't happen. Muslims in the UK actually have it better than ever, according to survey data and like social acceptance and all that. Like the kind of the 9/11 fear mongering is kind of worn off a little bit. Yeah, I try to balance that a lot. I try to balance with like trying to understand like the fear and like not being complacent about threats, but also just remembering like the times that we're in and what's like really like what's the most likely future,
Right, yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on to chat with me. Do you have anything coming out soon, or?
Well, the last video I did was on self-ID laws in Scotland that passed, and it made TERFs very mad. Do you know about this?
I don't.
It used to be the case in the UK, in Scotland, that you had to get like a GRC, gender recognition certificate.
Mhm.
The standard used to be that you had to socially transition for like 2 years and you had to have gender dysphoria and you had to be 18 or over. Scotland got rid of the gender dysphoria requirement, pulled the social transition time to 3 months, 6 months if you're under 18, 16 or 17. So that was like a pretty big move, just like much easier to get GRC than it was. 4 hours after I put the video out, the UK government blocked it. The first time ever that they've blocked a Scottish law from passing. So probably have to do a part 2.
Who blocks that? Like,
Sorry?
who specifically has the power to block that?
The British government, because Scotland has, Scotland's part of the UK, so we have devolved power. We have our own parliament, but the
Right.
power is devolved from London. So when they did that in 1998, they left one clause in that said, if Westminster believes that this law, believes is the strong word, believes that this law will clash with UK law, we can block it. And they've never used it. They've never used that until just this time. The first time they've ever blocked a Scottish law. And it was over
that the
self-ID.
was that the UK Parliament? I don't
Yeah.
know government there.
Yeah, there's the UK Parliament in England, and then there's the Scottish Parliament in Scotland. Yeah.
So they voted to shoot down that bill that they made.
I don't. Yeah. They voted. Yeah.
Okay.
I think they voted. I think it might have just been the government. Wait. No, I think it was a vote. And the Labour Party, unfortunately, because actually our turf problem is like our left wing is very turfy as well in the UK. Like a lot of these turfs are actually like progressive leaning on like every other issue. It's really weird. Yeah, the Labour Party abstained mostly, which is pretty sad. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll look out for that next video then.
Yeah, cool.
I'd be interested in seeing more of that. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. Everyone, that's Lonerbox, for everyone seeing this in the future, and basically everywhere at Lonerbox. And thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate the talk, as always, and try to shout yourself out.